So, hopeless romantic, there's a lot to ask about. So, I'm going to start with the very basic, which is at the very end credits, I see that you are thanking Barry Bostwick, which means that you must have met him and he provided you with some wonderful advice. So, talk to me a bit about that, because oftentimes when people meet celebrities, one of the first things they say is some are very good at passing on wisdom that they didn't have before, but more importantly, they leave an impact on the type of storytelling they make in the future.
Right. Well, I had met Barry Bostwick here in town in Hot Springs at SpotCon. It's a large convention for comic books and pop culture and all of these things. And he was one of the guests, and they actually that night had a live screening with audience interaction for the Rocky Horror Picture Show. So it was an exciting event. But in speaking with him, I had actually asked him, what advice would you give to, an up and coming filmmaker? And one of the things that I think really carried the most into Hopeless was that he had advised me that when you're writing a script, and I think a lot of young filmmakers make this mistake where you don't exactly write with things that you perhaps have access to, and so it's good to write a script and stay grounded. And he was a great guy, and that advice alone, I mean, I wound up when we shot Hopeless, it was pretty much all volunteer work and places and things that I had readily accessible. The bar, for example, was the owner was a friend of a friend, and things of that nature. And so that really, I think that did help in a large way.
Oh, sure. I noticed that it's Woodchuck Lounge, correct? I was like,
yeah, well,
Woodchuck Lounge? What's up with that?
That was actually kind of an in joke because I was born on February 2nd, and so it's Groundhog's Day. So I don't even know if I don't know if that came across, but it was kind of a little subtle joke there about woodchucks and groundhogs and such.
It was very cute, actually. I tend to pick up on things like that. I'm like those little tiny things that kind of stand out.
Yeah, well,
Yeah, and you did very well. I mean, there's so much to cover here. First of all, so Marks just makes my heart smile. So does Dixon. So the two of my favorite people are in this room right now. So I get to be a girl and say, oh, shucks. It's almost like a Hollywood moment. Only we're all broke in an indie, but that's okay.
No, very broke. Yeah.
So Marks has done a ton of work. And so as far as, and I'll get to him eventually, but from a director standpoint, please talk to me and tell me why it is that you feel that he was better in the lead role, because I don't know why, but for some reason, I think he could have done Sammy's role.
Well, it's funny. I mean, I did consider him for the role of Sammy.
Really?
I did, but there's something about Marks that I thought about, and maybe it was his background in law enforcement, sort of that strict, sort of rigid structure that I thought maybe carried over better to the lead. But no, I think he is a fantastic actor, and I think he's well deserving of his praise. And I think, honestly, and I hope it gets to be me, but I think somebody needs to take him and put him in like what Sam Raimi did with Bruce Campbell, and just really give him an independent, feature that he can really succeed in. I think he's good enough to carry his own. I mean, we were very blessed to have him as a part of the film.
Absolutely, without a doubt. And in fact, when you look at the two characters, one of the interesting parts about their relationship is that I really do believe Marks's character really likes Sammy. There's a part of him that literally, even though he's gruff and he makes all these bad decisions, he's kind of like, you know what, I'm still kind of got his back a little bit, etc., even though we've seen the film and we know what happens. So was that a chemistry that you instilled in them? So when you gave them the story, you said, or had they known each other, or how did this envelop?
I had actually gone to both of them and said, you should check out this movie because this is what I'm kind of going for. And luckily, they were able to pull from that and sort of play off each other. It was honestly, I hate to take credit for too much of it because it was a lot of people coming together and just really helping me make something just incredible. I hope so, at least.
And I'm gonna ascertain this isn't the first time you've heard this, but doesn't Sammy just look like a cross between like Brad Dorff and Sam Rockwell? I was like, oh my God, he
No,
could be
no, I
either
mean,
or.
yeah. Well, it's funny. I am a huge fan of Martin McDonough, and so Seven Psychopaths and Three Billboards were definitely an influence. So I'm glad that came across. And I've been compared to McDonough, but this now he's Sam Rockwell. Okay.
Oh, no kidding, right?
Yeah, right.
So
Yeah, it goes together.
talk to me a bit about what it's like to only have so many dollars. Like you said, you can have volunteer actors, etc. But you've got other things in this film. You've got excellent
Right.
music. You've got this beautiful songstress. You've got, the guns, the black and white usage, etc. So there's a lot that goes into that. So for your film in particular, what do you think is the biggest challenge with the smaller budget?
I think the biggest challenge really was special effects. I think as far as and that was something that we had a little bit of difficulty starting out with. In fact, Christopher Nolan, when he was making The Following, made a statement that he would never make a student film with any kind of firearm squib effects or what have you, because he was convinced that on a lower budget it would be too hard to pull off properly. And I think that I think we pulled it off decently, but it was definitely challenging. There's a lot of moving parts. In particular, we used a pneumatic air system that we for the shotgun scene.
Okay.
We had a tube attached to an air compressor, and that would fire out this sticky, goo out the back. It's very challenging, and I think that's part of the experience is being able to improvise off your own, improvisation. It's a very collaborative effort, and I'm sure a lot of people were certainly holding my hand along the way. So I'm very thankful for that.
Let's talk a bit about that. It's interesting because sometimes I love black and white, period. But the fact that you were able to pull off using color and black and white and switching between the two is something that always fascinates me. Right. So, was there a reason you chose to do the flip of, the both versus just black and white?
I think at one point I did consider going full black and white, but I always kind of intended for that sort of dramatic shift to go into the next part.
Okay. Talk to me about that long car scene you have, when Sammy gets picked up.
Yes.
I've talked to a couple other filmmakers about this, and so I'm looking really at the process of it, because the last filmmaker I spoke to talked about the great pains, and I mean pains it was to try to effectively get shots like that, where you've got the two actors talking, and in this case he had three, and then you have that long car scene. So tell me a bit about how you achieve that, and more importantly, would you recommend that other filmmakers try it? Because it just looks so challenging.
It is challenging. Luckily, we had a friend of mine and was working on the set, had connections to the University of Southern Arkansas University Tech, the SAU college here in town, and they were their entire team, the professor of the film school and all of them were just fantastic and were able to lend us a green screen. So that's actually how we managed to pull off that effect. But it's very challenging. And as far as if I would recommend it, I don't know. The one thing I will say is that I think if you have a green screen, I think it's a bit easier.
Very lightly, I'll tread on this. So my question is, and I asked another filmmaker this too, when you're using any sort of weapon on a set per se, I don't know, there's just no night. Just talk a bit about the experience. I guess the experience about that.
Luckily, we never had any form of ammunition on set. Everything was done after post. So all of the gunshot effects and all of the sort of pneumatic tubing and all of that was done after the fact. Everything was pretty much just, I mean, they were for show. And even with no ammunition within, however many miles of the set, the guns were still checked probably a minimum of 3 times.
Okay.
And so I think that in a situation like that, it's frustrating that, that could happen on such a much, bigger set. And,
Right.
how did that slip past?
Sure.
And there's not an easy answer for that.
Looking back on the experience now, is there anything that you would have done differently? Because I think we all look at our work and think, is there one thing to you where you say, you know what, I'm thrilled with everything, but, or are you just happy and content with the whole piece, which is fine too?
I, well, I think there's certainly things that I maybe could improve on knowing what I know now. There's definitely a learning curve, and this was no different, and it's an experience, and hopefully I'll have the opportunity to learn some more. I'm excited.
I think you're being way too modest. Way too modest.
Thank you.
But I'll finish with you when I'm done. Okay, so we get to Marks now. Oh my gosh, I'm so nervous. So when I met Michael Madsen for the first time, I said I was just so blown away. You remind me a great deal of him. There's very great amount of you, and
that's a big, huge compliment. Thank you.
it is. So first off, I want to start by saying that you have a very commanding presence in general, but in this film in particular, it's very obvious to me that you come across as the stronger of the two characters. So tell me a bit about, how you two piggybacked each other because you're working with Sammy directly. Tell me if you talked about this before you actually filmed it. Did you improv a lot of it? What was the whole experience with him working like?
Jeff is a great guy. As a matter of fact, I just saw him in Hot Springs a couple of nights ago, and he's trying to get me an apartment back downtown in Hot Springs where I was. He's a wonderful guy. We didn't know each other before, and we met each other, and we just, he's, I think, a stage actor there in Hot Springs. And I think the biggest thing that I learned early on is the backstory, and to do the character work, and to be able to just be an intuitive actor, and to know what the guy's feeling and what he's going through. As far as me and Sammy, it just kind of clicked. I just kind of played off him. It was pretty much by the script. I think the only time that I improv'd in the entire film, other than a word here or there, was in the bar scene with Cliff, when I was telling the guy that I played Twister with his old lady. So
yeah.
Great line.
There are some judges that had watched it, and the only criticism that they had, by the way, was, fuck this, fuck that, the continual obsessive need to use profanity. So I asked both of you, or in particular Marks, because I'm hearing you say a lot of naughty words. Do you feel it fits the piece? Because there are some people that think to themselves, you know what, it's entertaining, but it's a bit excessive.
I feel like what Stephen was going for, the Tarantino-ish look and cinematography. I feel like it fit. You're looking at that 1980s. You're looking at me being a hitman, but I was a cop for years in the 80s and 90s, and I used that word about as much as I did then. I mean, it's realistically. But I will say that was all Stephen. That was all his script, and I was on the book.
Oh my goodness, look at that.
But I really loved it. I felt freedom.
There's something to also be said about, again, these are observations from some of my judges. One of them thought during the course of the story, believe it or not, that Sammy in some ways was actually more respectful to the female characters than your character was, which I found interesting, because if you look at the ending and what happens, etc., is there any truth to that whatsoever? We obviously see what happens at the end, and so maybe that's where it's coming from, is, did your character make the right choice in the end, or could he have done something? Could he have still gotten his magical ending, or is it just not possible and he really is just who he is?
I feel like my character probably got his heart broke about 10 years before and hasn't been with anyone since. So he does feel a little nervous around being opened up to that type of relationship or commitment. And so I think he is standoffish with females to a
I
degree.
gotcha.
Not so much disrespectful, but just, he's been single for so long, he's just a little bit leery of it.
Oh, you betcha. And of course, then would it be fair to say, because you're kind of closed off and distant and your heart is just really hardened to some degree, that you make up for it in other areas? Like, for instance, when we see the scene where you go and track the guy down and you put the pillow over him and he's not dead
Right.
enough for you, so you got to blow him away. So, is that part of your life kind of spilling over to the other part and you're kind of overcompensating in the other area then?
Yes, everybody needs a climax of some kind. You've got to release tension, I believe. And I also feel like, like as anyone, my character also is lonely, but he's
Sure.
like risk versus reward. And, but he is lonely. He does crave that, that person. He's looking for his person.
Stephen, I want to ask you quickly, nominations and wins for this film, where do you stand at present?
I believe, goodness, I don't have it in front of me. I know that we have placed in the finals in the Austin After Dark Film Festival, and also placed in the finals, our first festival, Beyond the Curve. We placed in the finals of that in Paris.
Huh.
So there's been a couple of official selections, and it's been exciting, especially for a debut.
I believe it. I do. So I'm very grateful that I have this film here, and there's much to ask. But first off, I want to say collectively to all of you, all of my films are very, very good films. This one in particular touches on various different things. So I guess I want to start with the obvious. This is an adaptation. And so my question to you, Vincent, is why did you pick this adaptation to create into a film? And moreover, is there more pressure on a creator when you're adapting versus doing something original?
Can you hear me? So
Yes.
Thank you very much, Cindy, for this
Sure.
opportunity. Also meeting some old friends here. Yeah, this film was an accident to me. So the writer Kevin Wilson. So actually he was a teacher for my girlfriend when my girlfriend was in the Swan University. So I went to Swan University with my girlfriend, and we rent Airbnb in the campus, and not surprised that Kevin Wilson's book was on the shelf. So my girlfriend told me he's good. You should read this book, and especially that story. It's called Blowing Up on the Spot. So the first sentences, it was actually in my film is the monologue. So I count my steps because I had a boring and unhappy life, and I was just caught up by these first sentences from this story. I can relate it to my life, and that's why I was so, caught up by this story when I first read it. And then I also asked Mr. Wilson if he can give me the opportunity to adapt story, and luckily, because of my girlfriend, we have some sort of connection, so he gave me this opportunity. And for your second question, it was very hard to adapt the story than writing a story. In the story, the parents died because of a phenomenon called self-combustion. So they just burned themselves, naturally. So that one is really hard to adapt for me in the beginning when I read the story. But I think that's important for that story, the self-combustion, because the parents' death is mystery in the story, and that's why the lead actor, the lead character, in his imagination, he creates several different scenarios for the death of the parents.
Right.
So that's why in the beginning I hesitated, but eventually, in the movie, I adapt that. I didn't use the self-combustions, and I also create two different versions of the parents' death, but make it more easier to practice. Yeah, so I guess because this particular story caught up me in the beginning, so that's why even went through a lot of things. Eventually, I come back to this story and finally made it.
I also noticed your lead character does a tremendously good job. It's not just the dialogue. Again, with the film we had screened earlier, there's something to be said about silence, and then there's something to be said about dialogue. Because there are sometimes you hear him narrating throughout, and you can just hear desperation and the sadness in his voice. And then the way he walks, you can feel his emotions because he uses his body and his dialogue to convey to us how he is feeling, even through all the way until the end. Is that something that he came trained with? Because I've researched him and he looks like a phenomenal actor. So it looks like it wasn't a stretch for him.
It's another side story I should talk about. So for Vincent, I actually interviewed a lot of people in the beginning, and nobody feels like the right one. And then I think Temple, my producer, was also there that day for the audition.
Yeah,
so we didn't find anyone particular, and one of my crew member who was
our makeup
also,
artist.
Yeah, makeup artist, and she told me she has someone in mind that's really good. So we just called our lead character now, Woodrow. We just call him. Can he come just right away to our audition spot? And actually he came like in 40 minutes. And when he came, because he didn't prepare, he didn't read the script. I just gave him the script, let him play one of the scene, the one with the manager, the fighting, the struggle one. And he just did really good. And on the auditional side, I think he threw the chairs. I was like shocked. Like he's really good. And also we discussed a lot about the character, and I also let him improvise a lot for his roles. And I think Mr. Dixon Bayer can also discuss that part, because the parents scene, it's actually, I haven't written it in the script. I just put a parents fighting scene there, and the whole dialogue was improvised together between us during the rehearsal. So I think I use a lot of this kind of approach in this movie. Let actor improvise a lot, and we did a lot of rehearsal work, and a lot of ideas was from the actors and actress. Even the scene when Joanne and Kayla, they were sitting on the bed, talk about a chocolate flavor stuff. That was also an improvisation we had.
Oh, wow. Speaking of the sister's character, I wanted to ask a question relative to that. I've noticed that the lead male character, he seems, despite all of the way he behaves, he's still holding out hope that he can have a better life, a bigger life, etc. Whereas his sister seems almost resorted to the fact she's kind of drowned herself, forgive the pun, in the swimming, of course, and her existence with him. But outside of that, she just seems almost shell-shocked, you know what I mean? As if she's kind of resorted to her eventual, the fear that she will end up like her parents per se, whereas the lead male has more hope, or so it would seem. Is that the way you wrote it, or am I interpreting this differently than it is, or?
Yeah, actually in the story, it's not a sister, it's a brother. But the brother has kind of autism. So it's I think for a person with that, it's very hard to absorb the fact the parents committed suicide or died. So that's why I let the actress Gianna just try to mimic the way autism should look like. That's why your interpretation is right. She's kind of, for her it's hard to do that. And we also add the swimming part to the story, because the swimming part for her is important, because that's maybe a way to for her to avoid the actuality. So she just put a lot of efforts on the swimming part. Also for the main character Vincent, for him, he wants to have a happy life. That's how I interpret why he counts steps, because he counts steps because he want to have some controlness of his life. That's why he counts steps. So even he has a lot of struggles, everything seems wrong for him. For him, he always want to, make it better, have some hope, that sort of things. Yeah, that's why he counts steps. And that's why eventually he didn't count steps. He running, for the cemetery part. Right. He stopped walking and counting steps. He started running. That's also something I want to, add to it. This one is not in, this one is in the story, but I emphasize on this one because I think eventually he understands that he doesn't want to, hold on to something to make his life better. He just start to enjoying every moment. You know, every details, every moment of his life should be important. He shouldn't to.
I also noticed, and again, this is interpretation of the judges and myself. When we look at Greta's role, even though it's small, he's got the same habit of going to the same place and having coffee, etc. It almost feels like Greta's put in the capacity of being a pseudo mom, if you will, because of the absence of the parents. Again, was that done purposely? And also, how did you find her? Because she's delightful. Like I said, she's in there tiny, but she's just adorable. I just loved her character.
Yeah, that's something I want to add to the story, because Greta should be like a mom character, and also will be like a very warm for kind of, you know, a character. And when we did audition, the actress Lindsay who played Greta, was the first audition. I just picked her because in the real life she's kind of like you know, like a mother figure, like, you know, very kindness, like a lot of warmness kind of thing she has as a real person.
Now, Dixon, I have some questions relative to your character. First off, when you are taking on a character who's obviously ending his life, and in this case, you and your wife, and you've made this conscious decision to do this, and so the story plays out where we see the effect that this has had on your children. In order to prepare for this, obviously, it's a very complicated subject. So you can either walk into it loosely and say, all right, I'm just going to make this my own character, or do a ton of research. Did you prepare for this and speak to individuals who had contemplated this, etc., or was this more of a just step right on in and go?
No, I did not interview anybody or you know, talk to people about their personal experiences or thoughts about suicide, but I did read up on it, and I did study up on it a little bit, so I had a broader understanding of the nature of it and my interpretation of the nature of it. You know, it is and then I tried to bring, you know, my own, you know, personal thoughts and feelings about depression or anything else to the part, and the separation from the children and the justification for why it would be okay to go about this act, you know. So yeah, there was a lot of work done on it, but there wasn't a lot of interviewing or something like that. But there was a lot of background work done on it. And then in discussions with Issa Goldberg, and with Vincent, we really jointly discussed, you know, each of the characters' motivations and trepidations and some of their reluctance, although they weren't very reluctant to do this. They were kind of excited, which I think was a great spin that came within the story. You know, these were two people who they were motivated to do this. This was good for them, you know.
Unlike most people who are elongating and thinking about it and agonizing over it, and that you do have that opposite effect. In fact, so much so that it's almost like a party, if you will, like, oh, you know, we're going to plan this out and this is how we want it, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, was it your intention as the character playing the role alongside your wife that you wanted us to be able to see as the audience those flashbacks, the few times that we get to see you? Do you think that lends itself to the main characters, meaning that they've seen this or they've witnessed this, meaning they know that you've passed already? Is that foreshadowing them to maybe go in an opposite direction because of the fact that I'm guessing these characters must have had some sense that their parents, this is what they really wanted, but they can see how it's not going to work for them. Did that make sense?
Well, yeah, what I don't understand just a little bit about that question is if you're asking me if I understood any of the editorial context that you see now,
Yes.
Which I did not. I didn't.
Oh, okay.
No, we worked closely with Vincent, and you know, the timeline kind of for the characters was the timeline for the characters. How it's edited back into the story was an artistic choice that he made. You know?
I got you. I get it. Now, I must say that I've obviously seen you with another on-screen love in your other movie, and this once again is a matter of very good casting, because it would appear as though you and your wife, on-screen wife, do tremendously well together. It's a nice big bit of chemistry. So I'm curious to ask how long you worked together to get that chemistry, meaning rehearsal-wise, on set. And more importantly, please don't hate me for asking this, but you look a little heavier in that scene than you do now. So I'm guessing you gained weight for that character.
Thank you very much. It's all the DP's fault.
Oh,
So I think maybe Vincent could help here, because I think we did a couple of days of rehearsal or so. I forget exactly how many days, but
Twice.
She's a very good actress, and I think it's casting. I think he put us together, and he knew the chemistry would be there, and it was. So I think that it didn't take either of us a long time to feel chemistry.
Mhm.
And I think that was because he selected two people that were compatible that way. That's what I think. And I think she goes for heavy guys. She went for like heavy men.
I also noticed within the small bits and pieces that we get of your characters versus seeing, let's say, your children, your son and your daughter, that you were the ultra opposites of that. Because I see how the main character, the male, he starts off being very bored with his life, very just mundane, and trying to find, and continue with that hope that he has. And then eventually he turns around and becomes much brighter, etc. And obviously the daughter is having some issues to begin with, but it seems as though you're opposites for a reason, almost like we made this choice, kids don't. We're this type of personality, kids don't. And again, is that an intentional choice by the actor or director, or is that part of the story?
You mean the second scene? Parents appeared.
Yeah.
It's in his dream or consciousness. So actually, the parents' suicide scene was not witnessed by him in real life. That's why both one, the one with a very heavy struggle and fighting, and the one very peaceful, both are in his mind. So it's just how he interpret the suicide based on the things happen in the story. So he become brighter, and he also thought about the suicide might not be like that intense. Maybe it's just a peaceful, like sleep.
I have to ask about the Scrabble. That is just genius. We're working at a Scrabble tile factory. I have never heard of that. That is insane. Does that even exist? Was that like something you created? Because it's wickedly awesome.
That's not exist. That's in the story. So the story is kind of surreal, absurd kind of story. So because we don't have that kind of thing in the real life, that's why we did some artwork. It just look funny. We put all the tiles attached to a man-made object. Thank you for the art director who made it.
It was pretty beautiful the way that, because I didn't see that till the finished film, and I thought that was very.
It turns out a very good scene, because everybody watched it thinks this is like, for them it's a memorable scene.
Yeah,
in the movie,
sure.
Like
it's very surreal.
Surreal, yeah.
I understand that you've had 5 wins so far with this film. Would that be correct?
I think maybe my producer can come up. I think we went to 3 or 4 festivals, and we won 1 from the Houston International Film Festival.
That's it?
Bronze.
And I don't mean that rudely. I mean, really?
Yeah, we got selected for like 4 or 5 festivals, and we got 1 award from the Houston one.
Okay, I've got you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe you should tell me which festival I should go. For us, it's so hard to do it.
You're here. I mean, that's not the worst thing in the world.
Yeah.
Actually, that poses a good question, because we've been talking about film festivals lately and production, etc. And so with your film in particular, when you did this, were you looking to shop the circuit like most people? Because some films are done because they're amusing and entertaining, like Marvel movies, but you're not going to see a Marvel movie in a nursing home, or for instance, like a support group or things like this, because you touch on subjects, suicide in particular, that would be terrific for, various clinics, places, things like that. So has distribution been the ultimate goal all along, or were you just content with doing theater to theater until you get to that point?
I didn't actually thought about distribution at the moment. We still want to go to a lot of festivals, and hopefully can let a lot of audience to watch it. But I don't know how the distribution works for short film, because we know it's not like a feature film you can play in a theater.
Right.
Yeah.
There's
So
rules.
that's why we didn't thought about that. Yeah. But maybe it's an option. Yeah.
I'm so proud of all of you. And thank you so much for
Thank
giving
you.
me the
And Jenny,
benefit of
thank you
screening
so
me.
much for the
Thank you very
Thanks
opportunity.
very much. And say hi to Michael.
I will definitely do that. I'm gonna sign off here. You guys have the link. Robert, you have the link for your actual block, right? Just go sign on to there right now. I'll meet you there in like 2 minutes, I promise. I just gotta go check on him actually, and I'll be right back. But
All right.
thanks you guys.
Here's all.
See you
Thank
later.
you.
Okay, Cindy.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.